We'll start. Consideration of the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We'll call the roll.
Star,
Aye.
Longley,
Aye.
Friesman,
Aye.
Pittman.
Aye.
Next up, then, we will have a public hearing on the consolidated general fund levy. And we'll open that hearing. We have an affidavit of publication.
Yes, Your Honor.
Have we received any written comments?
I have not, Steve, have you?
I have none.
Do we have any oral comments tonight? Leave it open for a while to see if we have any oral comments. Any late arrivers? During oral comments, well, can we have discussion now while we're doing oral comments, Brad?
Yes, I think as part of the hearing, if you want to have some discussion, that's appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so just sitting here for 10 minutes doing nothing, we might as well do our discussion part. Steve, do you have anything to propose or tell us about?
Well, I can just kind of review, some of the general parameters here. So we're, holding the public hearing on the consolidated, consolidated levy rate, the new levy rate that they came out with last year that combines several levies down into one, which with the goal of eventually by fiscal year 29, getting that down to $8.10. We were at $8.64 last year. Now before last year, current year we're at $8.38.8. Now this year we're ratcheted down a little bit further. And our amount is $8.30530 total cents. So, so this year's rate is, a little bit further down, a little bit closer to that 8.10. Of course, right now there's proposed legislation that would reset the whole thing. But for right now, this is basically how this works. And so this is, the rate that includes what was formerly the $8.10 limit. The library levy rate, that 27 cents, that was eliminated. The emergency levy rate was 27 cents, that was eliminated. Those were both levies that we used, one for supplementing general fund operations, the other one specifically for library use. There was a myriad of other levies that were out there and available, none of which we used, and some of them were really specific. Unless you had a desire to build a bridge across the Missouri River, I know that was one of them, but it sticks out in my mind. But yeah, so now we're at that $8.30.530. Looking to approve that as part of our overall budget, which we'll look at here in 2 weeks when we look to approve the entire budget. But this is just for the general fund operations of it. I did put together some notes today just to kind of recap some of the activities, that are happening in the general fund. So, a lot of this, I go over all the levies on this page, but then I just kind of comment on some of the specific general fund pieces that we're working on. This year we were allowed 1.74% in growth. Our actual growth was 2.76%. So they limited, there's a limiting factor there on how much new revenue you can bring in, and ours went up by 1.74. We've got the changes of housing. We have the public safety officer that's paid by housing that comes in as revenue now as opposed to a transfer. We got the cost share with St. Charles Township on some potential fire truck engine repairs coming both in current year that we're in now, fiscal year 25, and more in fiscal year 26. We've got the final year of the cost share with Floyd County Medical Center, Floyd County for provision of the ambulance services. So we'll be addressing that issue sooner than later. And we're seeing nice increases in pool revenues, and I shouldn't say pool as much as Wildwood, right? With a lot of operations out there. So hoping that continues on. And hopefully on the pool side, we see our shortfall maybe decrease this year. That'd be great with pool improvements and a new climbing wall and things out there. So hopefully that helps drive patrons to the pool. Expenditure side of things, we're generally looking at 3% increase, with the exception of police. Police are 4%. Doing our annual replacement of squad car. We've got 15,000 budget for outdoor siren improvements. This would be the improvement that would automatically activate it without having to be standing right beside it to flip a switch. Fire department, there's a number of different, items as far as annual testing and repair that need to be happened that weren't being taken care of, that Sam has been addressing, so we've got some expenses there. Also looking at the hose dryer system, 25,000 personal protective equipment, new hoses. I talked about the ambulance already, we've got 100,000 budget in nuisance abatement projects, whether it be acquisition of property or general cleanup. We have software upgrades, street expenses. We're looking at about $100,000 in crack filling repairs. Sidewalk repair, we've got the Shaw Avenue dump that we need to maintain annual testing on. That's about $10,000. Library has worked hard to reduce their budget. I mean, with that's this year would have been about $73,000 that levy would have generated. So it's been quite a cut for them. And so of course, they've reduced their operating expenses as much as they can. That being said, we've still had to take on more in the general fund. So that's, eating up a little bit more of the pie. Park and Rec, we're looking at a welder, $3,500 to replace that. The old bathhouse roof is in terrible shape, needs to be replaced. That's 28,000. The Wildwood storage building, 35,000. That would open up a number of cart rental sheds that currently we can't rent because we're using it for city purposes. Our demand for renting cart spaces has grown strong in the last few years. Got 50,000 budget for the Railroad Museum for our share in the bathroom project. We've got 20,000 budget to replace the air conditioning units at the Wildwood Clubhouse, fix those. We did not budget 20,000 for the additional air conditioning units in the event center. So those are not being replaced at this time. Yeah, we worked through, as far as budget numbers for the Main Street annual operations, the facade program, the non-downtown building improvement program, ADC. We got those numbers worked into the budget. We just need to finish those agreements out in real life here. And by and large, that's a lot of the things that really kind of stuck out to me in the general fund. I'd be happy if anybody else has anything else to mention. Those are the things that popped in my mind as I work through the book. I mean, a lot of it's maintaining stuff that we have and just trying to make things work. There's not a whole lot of flash in here. So.
Any comments, anybody?
I appreciate the breakdown. The one question I have is with the library. So this year, this fiscal year budget that we're looking at, they can work within their budget they have. But how does it look next, the out years, 3 to 5 years?
Well, not good, Patrick.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's gonna be, I know they've reduced hours, further reduce hours, staff. So, I know a lot of their cuts have been in, children's programming, books, things of that nature. They've cut back on or tried to be more reliant on grant opportunities, which they're always phenomenal at getting various grants. The Andres grant is one in particular that, that comes in each year. And so it's one thing when you're going through their revenues and expenditures, trying to compare, how have they adjusted things. As well, you might have $50,000-$60,000 in a grant that, well, that's new money they brought in. That's not just pure expense. But I know this year they've probably cut another $25,000 out of their operational budget, which is not easy to do. So,
Thank you.
But that being said, the library is just part of the general fund, so it isn't the library that's necessarily gonna get cut. It might be Park and Rec that gets cut. It might be something, police something, because it's all part of the general fund. So
right.
we aren't gonna balance our budget on library reductions every year. I think they're just part of the whole puzzle.
That's very true.
And I know you said it several times during your comments, Steve, but just for the public's information, what we're talking about tonight is just the general fund. So this tax levy is part of what you'll see on your tax bill. Your whole tax bill will be higher than this number because it includes all of our other things such as benefits and insurance and things like that.
I don't even know if you'll see it broken down in your tax bill.
I mean, your levy will be higher than what we're proposing tonight.
Right, what we're talking about tonight is just, it's, a portion of what ultimately is probably gonna be the $15.91.
So I just don't want people saying, well, I thought you told me my levy was gonna be $8.30. No,
Yeah.
that's part of the $15 levy.
Right,
So people understand that, so they don't, come back and say, well, you just said it was only gonna be $8.30. Well, that's part of this.
yeah, what gets us from $8.30 to $15.95 is you've got, operation of transit. You've got amount that goes to the aviation authority. We have, property insurance, which we're renewing our plan tonight. Support of emergency management. We have our police and fire retirement fund. We've got our FICA and IBRs that we levy for, other employee benefits that get levied for, debt service. Within, specific, short-term borrowing and long-term borrowing. So those are all parts that make up the entire whole.
Just important that people realize the difference. Any other comments?
Thank you for clarifying that.
Don't see anyone else except for KCHA and Keith on the remote.
So, if you want to, I could walk through, the notice that went out that's so confusing, that has all the misinformation on it. Maybe just talk about that a little bit. That might be helpful.
Yeah, I talked about that a little on the radio today, but I think that's very important to, again, clarification of numbers that make it sound different.
Yeah, I think what the state was trying to do was trying to show, if you had a difference in your valuation of your property, try to show you how that tax could change. But what they put on here was basically, they really don't clarify it that way. So it makes it look like there's a potential 12.43% increase in tax request, which all this is showing is if you have $100,000 residential property this current year, and let's say for whatever reason that goes up by 10% to 110, they show you what the difference would be in what you would be paying. So, as we've talked about before, and this is not a revaluation year from the county, so there aren't revaluations happening unless you've done some additions or done something to add value to your property. It's likely that your number's not changing, but in a year that does change, that's what this is trying to show, right? So you have $100,000 home. You've got the current rollback, which is, let's just call it 46%. So you're paying 46% of $100,000 in fiscal year 25, the year that we're in now. And then you apply the current levy rate. If your property goes up by 10%, in this case, from 100 to 110,000, in the new year, you would apply the new rollback rate, which is now 47% instead of 46. So it's ticked up a little bit higher. Plus you apply the new levy rate, which our new city levy rate is actually about a penny or so less this year. But it shows you what the impact is of that valuation changing. So in this case, your home goes from $740 a year to $832 a year, creating that 12.43% increase. It's not a real increase. It's just showing you what happens when you take those factors into play, because this shows you this is how the rollback impacts things. This is how the rate impacts things. So, and then you get into commercial property, and so that's a little bit more convoluted because the first $150,000 in value for a commercial property is treated like a residential property. And so it gets rolled all the way back to residential. Whereas before it was just rolled back to 90%. So you do that down to residential for the first half, and then you calculate the second half at the 90%, and it kind of shows you those differences there. But that's just to kind of clarify what that's, trying to do. And I'm just, by the responses I've seen across the state, it's been quite confusing to a lot of, this is all confusing stuff begin with, and so that. I think they're trying to help, but it wasn't very helpful because it made it look like there's these changes that are happening that aren't happening, so. That's my clarification. As good or as bad as it is.
And we understand, we supposedly understand this and it's confusing to us. So somebody who gets that letter who doesn't have no background, it's gonna be really confused, so.
That's,
And plus it cost the state counties thousands and thousands of dollars to send these out. I think our county was like $6,000 or $8,000 just to send those letters out.
it's comments that I hear, it's, that letter was very
Yeah.
confusing. We're in Floyd County, why did it have to reference Polk County? It was just very, very hard to understand what they were trying to convey in that.
And then,
The intent was to clarify the process, but all it did was muddy the process. But be that as it may, any other comments?
Move to close the hearing.
Second.
Other comments? Clerk will call the roll.
Plumley,
I,
Friesman.
Aye.
Pittman.
Aye.
Star.
Aye.
Oh, Steve.
It was Keith, yep. Sorry about that, Keith, that went too fast.
Okay.
B, other items on the agenda, I have a motion to adjourn this special meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
okay,
Special meeting adjourned.
so Keith, all of you on Zoom, I have to end this meeting and I'll start the new one here in a minute or two. So you'll have to rejoin that new meeting. So we'll be getting that going here shortly.